Be Me Teresa, 28. Living in a major city, working a decent job in marketing, I consider myself pretty smart, especially when it comes to understanding people and social dynamics. I see my friends get into these messy, emotional relationships and just shake my head. It's like they're navigating a hurricane without a map. I always believed that modern dating is a market, plain and simple. It's not unromantic to admit that. It's just being realistic. A few months ago, I was having brunch with my two closest friends, Marion and another girl. I was laying out my whole philosophy on the subject. A woman's primary assets are her youth, her looks, and her emotional capacity to nurture a relationship. These are objectively depreciating assets. Time is not on our side. A man's primary asset is his ability to provide resources, stability, and security. For most men, this is an appreciating asset. They earn more as they get older. Therefore, a successful relationship is a fair exchange of these assets. It's not about mushy feelings that fade. It's about a mutually beneficial partnership. My other friend was nodding along, completely getting it. "That makes so much sense," she said. "It's like a business merger." Exactly. But Marion, she was always the sentimental one. She just stirred her coffee and looked at me with this concerned expression. She asked what happened to just liking someone for who they are, falling in love. I explained that falling in love is a narrative society sells to women to get them to undervalue themselves and give away their prime years for free. It's emotional labor, aesthetic labor, domestic labor. It all has value. A man who truly values you will show it with tangible, consistent investment. Not just words and cheap dates. Marion didn't look convinced, but I knew I was right. I had read enough articles and seen enough failed relationships to know my approach was logical and self-respecting. So, I decided it was time to stop theorizing and start applying. I spent about a week on the dating apps, but this time with a clear strategy. No more swiping on guys with blurry photos or profiles that just said, "Ask me." I was conducting due diligence. I filtered by education, profession, and general life stability. After a few duds, I found a guy named Larry. His profile was stable. That's the best word for it. He was 30, an engineer for some tech company. Photos of him hiking, a picture with a dog that wasn't his, and a clear, smiling headshot. No red flags. Seemed like a low-risk, steady-growth kind of stock. We matched and texted for a bit. He was polite, asked good questions, and seemed genuinely interested. We agreed to meet for drinks that Friday. I spent a solid hour and a half getting ready. Hair, makeup, outfit. This is part of the initial investment, presenting the product in the best possible light. He showed up on time, which was a good sign. He looked like his pictures, maybe a little better. Clean-cut, friendly eyes. He drove a practical, reliable sedan. Not impressive, but not a deal-breaker. It signaled fiscal responsibility over flashiness. The date itself was fine. He was easy to talk to. He talked about his job, which he seemed to genuinely enjoy. Something about designing infrastructure for data centers. I mostly listened, nodding and asking the right questions to gauge his ambition and financial literacy. He didn't brag about money, but he mentioned saving for a down payment on a condo. Good. Long-term planner. When the bill came, he paid without any hesitation or weird comments. Another checkmark. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car and said he had a great time and would love to see me again. I went home feeling cautiously optimistic. The initial screening was successful. The first month of dating Larry was the extended vetting phase. He was consistent. He called when he said he would. He planned dates in advance. He did a lot of nice things. One week, I was swamped at work, totally stressed out. He showed up at my apartment with takeout from my favorite Thai place. Another time, my laptop was running incredibly slow and I was complaining about it. He took it for a few hours and worked his magic on it. It ran like new. He didn't even make a big deal out of it. These were all good gestures, don't get me wrong. But in my mind, they were also low-cost investments. Time and effort are valuable, yes, but they aren't the same as capital investment. To keep things objective, I literally made an Excel spreadsheet. I know it sounds crazy, but it was the only way to track the relationship's ROI without letting messy emotions cloud my judgment. Column A was my investments. I'd log things like time spent on appearance for date, 1.5 hours, emotional labor, listened to him vent about his project manager for 45 minutes, opportunity cost, skipped a girls' night to see him. Column B was his investments. I'd log the monetary value of everything. Dinner at Italian restaurant, $120, movie tickets, $35, flowers he brought over, $40. After the first month, the spreadsheet was not looking good. My column was full of intangible but significant investments of time and energy. His column was a list of moderate, sensible expenses. The balance was off. I was over-investing for the returns I was getting. I mentioned this dynamic to Marion over the phone. She was silent for a moment, and then she asked if I was happy. I told her happiness is fleeting, but a solid life partnership is built on a fair foundation. She said, "Teresa, he sounds like a really good guy. He's kind to you. He fixes your computer. Isn't that worth more than a $120 dinner?" I tried to explain that kindness is the bare minimum. It's the cost of entry. I was looking for a man who understood value and was willing to invest in a premium asset, which is what I considered myself to be. She didn't get it. I decided Larry just needed a little guidance, a little encouragement to step up his game. I started dropping hints. I'd mentioned how my coworker's boyfriend just whisked her away for a surprise weekend trip to a fancy vineyard. Or I'd send him a link to a new high-end restaurant that just opened downtown with a comment like, "Wow, this place looks incredible." He'd respond positively, saying things like, "Yeah, that looks great. We should check it out sometime." But he never made the actual reservation. Instead, he'd plan a date to go to a local food truck festival or pack a picnic for us to have in the park. Charming, but cheap. I started to feel a bit of resentment building. Here I was, offering him a partnership with a smart, attractive woman, and he was treating it like a casual hobby. I also started probing more about his career. I'd ask if he was on track for a promotion, or if his company offered good bonuses. I framed it as me being interested in his life, but really, I was assessing his growth potential. He seemed content with his position. He liked his work-life balance. He once told me he'd rather make a little less money and have more time for his hobbies and friends than grind 80 hours a week for a bigger paycheck. That was a major red flag for me. It signaled a lack of ambition. A man's drive is directly linked to his ability to provide. If he's content, that means he's not driven to provide more. Our 3-month anniversary was approaching. This was a milestone. In my view, this was the point where the initial trial period was over, and a real commitment to investment should begin. I made it pretty clear I was expecting something special. I talked about how much I loved this one minimalist jewelry brand I'd seen online. I mentioned how I'd never been to a truly fancy, multi-course tasting menu restaurant. I was basically giving him a roadmap to success. The night of our anniversary, he came to pick me up. He was holding a neatly wrapped, flat, rectangular gift. Okay, I thought, maybe it's a gift certificate for a spa weekend. Acceptable. We went to a nice, but not spectacular, restaurant, the same one we went to on our second date. He was being very sweet and attentive all night, telling me how much the last 3 months had meant to him. After dinner, he gave me the gift. He had this big, hopeful smile on his face. I opened it. It was a photo album, a very nice leather-bound photo album filled with pictures of us from the past 3 months. He had printed out selfies we'd taken, photos from our hike, a picture of me laughing at the food truck festival. Next to each photo, he had written a little caption, a private joke, a memory of the day. It was thoughtful. It had clearly taken a lot of time and effort, and all I could feel was a crushing wave of disappointment. I smiled, of course. I told him it was the sweetest gift I had ever received. But inside, I was just thinking about the spreadsheet. The cost of this gift was maybe $50 for the album and photo printing. The rest was just time. I felt a knot of anger in my stomach. We went back to my place, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I was quiet and distant. He could tell something was wrong. He kept asking me what was on my mind. Finally, I just broke. I sat him down on the couch and told him we needed to have a serious talk about the state of our relationship. I tried to be calm and logical. I explained that a partnership requires equal investment from both sides. I told him that I felt I was putting in a tremendous amount of effort, emotional, social, and aesthetic, and that I wasn't seeing a corresponding level of investment from his side. He looked completely confused. He said, "I don't understand. I thought things were going great. I try to be a good boyfriend. I care about you a lot." That's when I made the mistake of mentioning the gift. I said that an anniversary is a significant event, and the gift should reflect the significance and value of the relationship. I told him that while the album was sweet, it didn't exactly scream, "I value you and our future together." His face changed. The confusion was replaced by a kind of stillness. He asked me, "What would a gift that values you look like, Teresa?" I took a deep breath and decided to just be direct. I talked about how relationships are a reflection of a man's ability and willingness to provide, that grand gestures are a way of signaling his commitment and his capacity. I may have used the phrase market value when referring to my time and what I bring to the table. I was trying to make him understand the logic of it all, to see things from my clear, rational perspective. He just sat there, listening without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. I thought he was processing it, maybe finally understanding. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were just cold. There was no warmth left in them. He said, "I get it now. I finally get it." He stood up. He told me he had been completely wrong about me. He said he thought he was building a connection with a person, but he was actually just in an extended audition he was never going to pass. He said, "This isn't a relationship to you. It's a business transaction. And I'm sorry, but my feelings for you aren't for sale, and they're not something I'm going to put a price tag on." I tried to argue, to tell him he was twisting my words, that he was being defensive because he couldn't meet my standards. He just shook his head. He said, "You know, for weeks I've been feeling like I was constantly being graded, like every single thing I did was being entered into a ledger. I guess I was right." He walked to the door. His last words to me were, "I'm not afraid of commitment, Teresa. I'm avoiding being treated like a line item on a budget. I'm looking for a partner, not an accountant." And then he left. I just stood there in my living room, completely stunned. My first reaction was anger. How dare he? He was just another man intimidated by a woman who knows her worth. He couldn't handle a woman with high standards, so he twisted my logic to make me sound like the bad guy. A classic case of male fragility. I picked up the photo album and threw it in a corner. I called Marion to tell her what happened, expecting sympathy. I told her Larry had revealed his true colors. He was cheap, unambitious, and couldn't handle a direct conversation about expectations. She was quiet on the other end of the line. All she said was, "Teresa, he made you a book of your memories together, and you threw it away." I told her she didn't understand. He wasn't the right investor anyway. His portfolio was too conservative. It was a learning experience. My theory wasn't wrong. My choice of subject was. I had wasted 3 months on a low-yield asset. It was time to aim higher. It was time to find a man who actually understood the language of value. I felt a strange sense of relief. The Larry experiment was over. Now the real work could begin. After the whole thing with Larry, I took about a week to recalibrate my strategy. My takeaway wasn't that my philosophy was flawed, but that my target demographic was wrong. I had been fishing in a pond when I should have been fishing in the ocean. Average men like Larry, with their average salaries and average ambitions, were never going to understand the concept of high-value investment. They operate on a scarcity mindset. They see a confident woman's standards not as a goal to aspire to, but as a threat. I needed to find a man who operated on a mindset of abundance. A man to whom $1,000 dinner or a weekend in Paris was not a terrifying expense, but a casual Tuesday. I decided to stop using the mainstream dating apps. They're flooded with low-tier options. It's like trying to find a diamond in a landfill. Instead, I started curating my social life to place myself in high-net-worth environments. I bought a membership to an upscale gym I couldn't really afford. I'd go to the lobby bar of a 5-star hotel by myself after work, order one expensive glass of wine, and just sit there, looking poised and unapproachable in a powerful way. I even went to a few art gallery openings, pretending I understood the weird sculptures. It was exhausting and expensive, but I saw it as a marketing expense, a necessary cost to acquire a high-value lead. For about a month, nothing really happened. I got a few looks, a few awkward conversations that went nowhere. I was starting to get discouraged. Then, one evening, I was at that hotel bar, nursing a single glass of Sancerre for over an hour. A man walked in, and the entire vibe of the room shifted. He was older, maybe late 30s or early 40s. He wore a suit that was clearly tailored, and a watch that probably cost more than my car. He wasn't movie star handsome, but he radiated a kind of powerful, confident energy that was impossible to ignore. He ordered a scotch, neat, and his eyes scanned the room. They landed on me. He held my gaze for a second, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and then turned back to his drink. It was a test, and I knew how to play. I didn't smile or wave. I just held his gaze for a moment, then calmly looked away, as if unimpressed. A few minutes later, he was standing at my table. He introduced himself as Julian. The conversation was different from the very beginning. He didn't ask me what I did for a living or what my hobbies were. He asked me what I was drinking. He talked about the artist whose work was on the wall. He spoke with a kind of easy authority, like he was used to being the most important person in any room he entered. He was a venture capitalist. He talked about deals, about markets, about calculated risks and massive rewards. He spoke my language. At the end of our conversation, he didn't ask for my number. He gave me his business card and said, "If you'd like to continue this conversation, have dinner with me on Friday." It wasn't a question, it was a directive. I waited exactly 1 day before texting him to confirm. Our first date was at a restaurant that probably had a 6-month waiting list. He had a standing reservation, of course. The whole experience was on another level. The sommelier knew him by name. The chef sent out a special dish just for our table. Julian ordered for both of us, without asking what I wanted. Normally, that would have infuriated me. It's a classic sign of toxic masculinity. But in this context, it felt decisive, powerful. He was a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. The bill must have been astronomical, but he paid it without even looking at the total. This was it. This was the kind of investment I had been looking for. The next 2 months were a blur of luxury. Julian didn't do low-cost dates. There were no picnics in the park. There were weekend trips on a private jet. He didn't bring me flowers. He had a standing order with a high-end florist to have a new arrangement delivered to my apartment every Monday. He didn't make me a photo album. He bought me a Cartier bracelet just because. I was finally living the life I knew I deserved. My friends were stunned. My one friend, the supportive one, was ecstatic for me. See, you just had to hold out for what you're worth. Marion was more reserved. She'd ask me questions like, does he listen to you? Does he ask about your day? I'd tell her, of course, but the truth was, not really. Our conversations were almost always about him, his deals, his wins, his frustrations with his incompetent subordinates. My job, my friends, my life, they rarely came up. When I tried to talk about something I was passionate about, like a new marketing campaign I was proud of, he'd listen with a kind of detached amusement. It was like a parent listening to a child talk about their day at school. Once, I tried to bring up a social issue I cared about, something related to feminism. He literally laughed. He said, "Darling, leave the world saving to the people who can't afford a good distraction. You're too beautiful to be so serious." I felt a small prick of annoyance, but then he signaled for the waiter to bring another bottle of champagne, and I let it go. This was the trade-off. I was providing the aesthetic labor, the beautiful, intelligent companion on his arm. In exchange, he was providing the lifestyle. It was a clear, unspoken contract. I thought I was happy. I told myself I was happy. I was posting pictures from rooftop pools and exclusive parties. My life looked perfect from the outside. But there was this weird, hollow feeling that started to grow. I felt less like a partner and more like an accessory. A very well-maintained, expensive accessory, but an accessory nonetheless. He never said, "I love you." He never talked about a future. Our relationship existed entirely in the present moment, one luxurious experience at a time. He was the CEO, and I was on a very glamorous, very precarious contract. The end came suddenly, and without warning. We had plans to attend a charity gala that Saturday. It was a big deal, and I had bought an incredible dress. On Friday afternoon, I got a text message from him. Not a call, a text. It read, "Teresa, something's come up. I won't be able to make it tomorrow. In fact, I think it's best we put a pin in this. It's been fun. All the best." That was it. No explanation. No, it's not you, it's me. Just a cold corporate dismissal. He might as well have texted, "Your contract has been terminated, effective immediately." I was in shock. I read the message 10 times, thinking it had to be a mistake, a joke. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, demanding an explanation. No reply. I had been ghosted. The next day, the reason became painfully clear. One of the society blogs I followed posted photos from a yacht party in the harbor, and there was Julian, with his arm around another woman. She was younger, much younger, a model, probably 22 at most. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, looking exactly like the carefree, beautiful accessory he wanted. The caption on the photo said something about Julian and his new protégé, and it hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't his partner. I was an asset. And he had just liquidated me in favor of a newer, shinier model with a longer shelf life. He had taken my philosophy, the one I was so proud of, and used it against me with ruthless efficiency. I had wanted a man who understood value, and I found one. He valued my youth and beauty, and the second he found someone with more of both, he upgraded without a second thought. There was no emotion in it. It was just good business. I completely fell apart. For 2 days, I didn't leave my apartment. I just cried and felt this profound sense of humiliation. The expensive bracelet on my wrist felt like a tracking tag. The flowers on my counter started to wilt. I called Marion, hysterical. I told her everything, sobbing about how cruel and heartless Julian was, how all men were just predatory users. I expected her to comfort me, to tell me I was right, that he was the monster. But she was quiet for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and said something that cut through all my self-pity. She said, "Teresa, I'm so sorry you're hurting, but what did you expect?" I was taken aback. "What do you mean? I was treated like I was disposable." "You were," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You entered into a transaction, and you lost. You made the rules, Teresa. You said love was a market. You said your value was in your looks and youth. Julian just happened to be a much better player at that game than you are." I started to protest, to say it wasn't the same. She cut me off. "Wasn't it? You did the exact same thing to Larry. You measured his worth in dollars and cents. You audited his every move. You decided he wasn't a good enough investment, and you cut him loose because he gave you a thoughtful gift instead of a designer one. How is what Julian did any different? He just had more money to play with." I was speechless. Her words were hanging in the air, just brutal and true. "Larry saw a person," she continued. "He saw you, and you saw a balance sheet. Julian saw a balance sheet, and he saw you as a line item on it. You got the world you wanted. You just ended up on the wrong side of the ledger." We hung up soon after that. I had nothing left to say. Her words echoed in my head for days. I was sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by all the evidence of my high-value relationship, and I just felt empty. I walked over to the corner where I had thrown the photo album from Larry. I picked it up and brushed off the dust. I sat on the floor and slowly turned the pages. A picture of me, mid-laugh, with ice cream on my nose. His caption read, "The day we discovered the best salted caramel in the city." A selfie of us on a hiking trail, both sweaty and smiling. Proof that I can get you to wear sneakers. Page after page of small, simple, happy moments. Moments where I wasn't an asset. I was just a person. A person someone genuinely liked spending time with. And I had rejected it all because it didn't have a high enough price tag. I felt this overwhelming wave of regret and confusion. My whole system, my whole logical framework for how the world was supposed to work, had crumbled. I thought I was being smart, strategic, a woman in control, but I had just been playing a stupid, lonely game that I was always destined to lose. I sat there for a long time, not knowing what to think. My ideology told me that men were the problem. Larry's lack of ambition, Julian's toxic nature. But Marion's words kept coming back. Maybe the problem wasn't them. I opened my laptop. I needed an outside opinion. I needed someone to tell me I was right, that I was the victim here. I went to a place I knew I could get unfiltered, anonymous feedback. I started typing out a new post. I framed it carefully, making myself the sympathetic protagonist. I wrote about how I know my own worth and have high standards for a partner. I mentioned the nice guy who couldn't keep up and the successful guy who treated me like an object. I laid out all the things I bring to a relationship, my looks, my smarts, my support. I ended the post with a question that felt both genuine and desperate. I just wanted someone to explain it to me. In a world where I did everything right according to the rules I had learned, where did I go so wrong?